Corruption by P.K. Armstrong. Chapter 5. Angel, having recently pulled background on the Knoll brothers, decided to head to their place of residence first. Jeremy Knoll was 18, and Angel knew she did not need parental permission to speak with him. Sean, being 16, was another matter, but she felt if she caught them both at home, she could get the boys to speak to her. The neighborhood she ended up in was Victoria Hill, once a neighborhood populated by doctors, bankers, and lawyers, but now full of lower to middle class, blue-collar workers. Some of the lower income families could afford the neighborhood because of the multi-generational living. On any given day, you could find stay-at-home mothers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins coming and going. They were good, hard-working people that had respect for themselves and others. That, coupled with the minimal foot traffic, meant crime was low in the area. The Knoll family was typical for the area. Diana Knoll was a CNA at a local hospital, and Jonathan Knoll was a service technician at a local car dealership. As she pulled up in front of 2322 Sheffield Lane, she noticed two young men in the front yard, one mowing the grass, the other holding a trash bag and picking up debris. She exited her vehicle, not bothering to lock it. She didn't think she would be going far. "Hi, are you Jeremy Knoll?" she shouted to be heard over the lawnmower, and nodded at the younger boy. "And you're Sean?" Jeremy turned off the lawnmower. "Who's asking?" Angel pulled out her card and handed it to him. "Call me Angel." Jeremy read her card, turning it over to check the back. "Private detective. How do you know our names? What do you want with us?" Angel decided to cover herself. "I'm actually here to speak with you, Jeremy. Do you have a minute?" Sean's gaze went from Jeremy to Angel and then back to Jeremy again. Jeremy shrugged nonchalantly, and Angel took it as consent. She walked over and sat on the steps of the wide porch. Jeremy hesitated and then followed, grabbing his bottle of water off the porch. He opted for leaning against the railing with one foot on the bottom step. Angel pulled out her smartphone and showed Jeremy a local online story. It was a picture of a house at 1464 Blackbird Lane, surrounded by police cars and the medical examiner's van. "Body found at home on Blackbird Lane" was in large print at the top of the page. Jeremy looked at the picture, taking longer than necessary. When he looked up, he looked not at Angel, but turned to look at his brother Sean, who had moved closer to the porch and was standing just behind him. Sean had yet to see the picture. "Why are you showing this to me?" Jeremy asked with a show of defiance, but Angel recognized the false confidence in a boy who, although legally a man, was nothing but a scared little kid. Angel decided for the direct approach, but first wanted Sean's initial reaction. She stared directly at Sean and asked, "Why am I showing you a picture of a house on Blackbird Lane where a dead body was found?" Angel watched as Sean's face went pale. Jeremy heard him gasp and put his hand down behind him, motioning for Sean to keep silent. Angel waited until both boys had their eyes on her. "Since you both will very soon find yourself dealing with the police," she heard Sean take another sharp breath, "I will give you a tip." They both stared at her wide-eyed. "Cops and attorneys never ask a question they don't already know the answer to." She paused dramatically. "I'm the same way." She paused again and held up the newspaper article. "Recognize the house?" Sean apparently had been holding his breath because he let it out loudly. This time his brother turned to look at him. He looked back at Angel, his eyes a little wild, but said nothing. Angel asked again, slowly, "Recognize the house?" Jeremy wasn't done playing the rebel. "So what if I do?" His admission startled Sean, who whispered urgently, "Jeremy!" Jeremy motioned to Sean again. "Shut up!" he hissed at his brother. Angel looked squarely at Jeremy, and her eyes narrowed. "You knew that dead body was in that house when you went in," she accused. "No!" Sean shouted. "Shut up!" Jeremy yelled at Sean again, and emphasized it when he stepped back and shoved his younger brother. "Just shut up!" Jeremy looked back at Angel with a scowl and clenched fists. Angel stared back, not speaking. She watched as Jeremy's anger began to drain away. Angel spoke before he completely withdrew. "You didn't know, did you?" Jeremy shook his head. Sit down, Jeremy. He sat down, and Angel slid over to sit closer to him. Tell me, please. Jeremy sighed heavily. We've been going into houses and stealing stuff. Angel chose not to overwhelm Jeremy with the weight of his crimes and focus on the one she most cared about. How did you pick the house on Blackbird Lane? We hear stuff. And Blackbird Lane? Some guy brought his mom's car into the shop. Said she wasn't going to need it because she was going on a cruise the next week. So I scoped it out at various times. Didn't see anyone coming or going for a few days, so I thought it was empty. Angel paused, watching his body language. She didn't think he was lying, but she had to be sure. So you saw the body after you had already entered? No, we never saw any body, right, Sean? We didn't. We really didn't, Sean said pleadingly, and then inadvertently touching on the truth. Maybe Joshua saw it. He was acting weird in the hallway. Weird? What do you mean? Weird. He was shaking and looking around like he was scared someone was going to catch us. He couldn't keep still. But then we left and Jeremy picked up the story. Yeah, he was real quiet like in the car. We always go get burgers and fries afterwards, but he said he had to get home. Angel looked at both the boys. They were telling the truth. She was sure of it. But she would need more about the burglaries to clear them. Before she could speak, however, a pickup truck pulled into the yard. A man, whom she presumed to be Jonathan Knoll, exited and walked across the lawn. He spotted Angel, but didn't seem alarmed. Hey, what's going on? Who are you and why are you talking to my boys? He asked calmly. Angel wondered how a man this calm and collected could have two sons who were burglars. She stood and greeted him. Hello, I'm Angelica Dale. She handed him a card also. He looked at the card, puzzled, and then looked at his sons. Jonathan Knoll. Before he could ask again, she continued. I was speaking to Jeremy. She glanced at Jeremy, his head practically bent to his lap, and saw the part of his face she could see had gone stiff and white. Angel faltered. Normally, she would have just told on the boys, but even she could see they were genuinely frightened, and she didn't want to make it worse. Jeremy, she said quietly, do you want to be the one to tell your father what's going on? Angel felt worse when he lifted up his head to look at her, and a large tear trickled from his eye and trailed down his face. He bit his lip, shook his head at her, and dropped his head again. Sean? Jonathan Knoll directed a piercing stare at his youngest son. What have you guys done? Sean began to cry, and Angel sighed. This was going to take some finesse. They had started to calm down Sean when Diana arrived, and he started to cry again. She was actually more helpful in calming the boys than Jonathan, and after sitting on the patio furniture and providing drinks and snacks, Angel explained what the boys had been up to. Of course, it wasn't time for levity, but the Knowles' reaction to their boys' crime spree made Angel smile on the inside. They reminded her so much of her parents. Angel was raised by a cop and a psychologist, and there were often extreme reactions to her bad behavior growing up. Her father, the cop, always wanted to have a squad car pick her up and leave her in a cell for a few hours. Her mother, on the other hand, always wanted to talk with Angel about why she did what she did. Usually, in the end, balance always won out, and Angel never had to spend a day in jail. So I will tell you the reason I asked for the boys' names is because neither Mr. Kincaid nor myself believe the boys had anything to do with the man's death, but their involvement in the burglaries will come to light, and he wanted me to get ahead of it. Angel slightly exaggerated Mr. Kincaid's desire for equal treatment for the boys. Diana Knoll was truly shocked about her boy's behavior, but Angel gave her credit. She kept her emotions in check. So what do you need from us? I don't think we can afford a high-priced attorney like Kincaid, Jonathan stated plainly. Don't worry about that. I'm thinking if the boys had equal participation, then maybe Mr. Kincaid can represent them all. I mean, he will have to represent his son anyway. So what do you need from us? Diana Knoll asked again. What I need from the boys is a list of places they hit and how they learned there would be no one on the premises. I think that will go a long way to proving they were unaware of the body at 1464 Blackbird Lane. Jonathan Knowles shook his head. He raised his hand and began rubbing his forehead. I saw that on the news and I thought, wow, I wonder how long that guy was laying there dead. But I never thought my boys. His voice trailed off. They looked at both boys. Angel got a notepad out, and beginning with their first burglary, they compiled a list with the details of their activities. Angel drove off from the Knoll home, knowing she left the situation in the best possible way. After obtaining the information she needed, she called Kincaid and advised him on what she thought should be done. He agreed to represent all three boys, the two Knoll boys, for free, and to meet them at the police department in 3 days to give a chance for Angel to verify the information the Knoll boys had provided. She briefly thought about Christopher Roland. He had not contacted her since he had first arrived home. It didn't bother her that much. She had been a cop before. She knew the kind of schedule Christopher worked, especially because he was in a major case investigations unit. She wondered if he would consider it an imposition if she called and asked if they had a name on the victim found on Blackbird Lane, but then thought better of it. The identity of the victim was very likely immaterial to the burglary, so she really didn't need to know, but she had a nagging feeling that it would turn out to be important somehow.